in my thoughts and in my dreams. They're always in my mind. These songs of hobbits, dwarves, and men, and elves, come close your eyes. You can see them too.
Hail and well met! Welcome to Counter Monkey. I'm your humble storyteller Spoony, and I'm here to tell you of my own epic adventures of the past, so that you might laugh and learn. This is one of the oldest and most academic beginner's traps. Basically, the first one I learned when I started playing D&D, and it astounds me how many players continue to fall for it. It's usually newbies, but sometimes not. And I really wonder why it catches so many people, whether it's ignorance or honestly, if some players just willingly step into it because it's funny or they really want to get something interesting going on. But here's the deal. All women in role-playing games are the devil. Literally, they're the devil. Okay, let me put it this way. You know how it's one of the biggest stereotypes in gaming. You might have even heard it on, the Dead Alewives or something like that. There's always a character or multiple characters who, whenever they go anywhere, like a tavern or an inn or something like that, they always are very quick to, tell the DM they're looking for some of the hottest bar wench, or, the woman behind the counter, or the hottest woman who's just, spending time there. Or if they ever rescue a damsel in distress, anywhere from brigands in a dungeon, whatever, they'll always try to hit on this young lady. And even female player characters in general might be fielding off various horn dogs, much to their discomfort, and rightfully so. But here's where the trap is. And I know a lot of you have hit this one. And it goes like this. If you're a player character, and a woman ever either approaches you or responds to your sexual overtures with interest, she is the devil. And I mean that. Like, the DM will intentionally do this as, like, there's no way they'll fall for this, and then they fall for it, and then you've got, like, this instant kill, and the DM feels kind of bad about it, or he's just laughing, but no, it's like, if a woman just flat out approaches you, and, like, immediately starts, like, dry humping your leg or suggests you go somewhere private, for some reason, players will be like, yes! My 18 charisma paid off! No. Because what happens is you go somewhere, you go to a back alley so she can suck you off, or you get a room and you go up there, she's a succubus! I guarantee you she's a succubus! If you don't know what a succubus is, you probably have a fairly good idea, but what it is a sex devil. That they take your soul by fucking you. They suck your soul out through your dick. That's what they do. Why? Because they're devils. That's all I got. And before you start, like, saying that this is not me, okay, this happens. This happens a lot. And I know there's a lot of you guy gamers out there who are like, oh my god, yes, I got stuck by that one. Or that one guy last week, I can't believe he fell for that. This happens so much where it is amazing. I can't even explain it. And let's just, let's just say she's not a succubus. Happens a lot. Trust me, I've done this one. I can't even believe I caught. The guy's like, dude, I scored. My guy is so fucking suave. No, he's like, what? That's a fucking succubus? Oh my god. No. But let's say it's not even a succubus. If there's ever a woman who approaches the party in any way and tries to, like, flaunt her sexual wiles, or even just comes across as overly pathetic and needs help. If a woman approaches you in general in Dungeons & Dragons, it's a trap. Seriously. Either she's a spy, or she's an assassin. Any woman who wants to tag along with the party, like, even woman, like hell, if you watched fucking, the D&D game at Con Bravo, I fell for it, because even if you're, like, forced to bring a woman along with you, because the whole job was like, oh, watch this guy's daughter and wander. It's a trap. I guarantee you she's gonna fuck you in more ways than one. Maybe even the literal way, but she'll fuck you 2 or 3 ways. And sure enough, she drugged us. Every woman who wants to go with you Evil. Guaranteed. Now, I'll get to the why in a second because this has so many fucking, sexual, sociological, mental, psychopathic depth to it. It's really sad, honestly, but it's you see it for yourself. I fall victim to this. Every gamer around there who are longtime veterans of this still act shocked. Although, this is where I say we willingly fall into it. I kind of saw it coming. I did. Of course, I'm likely to say that, but my character. I think at that point, my character. It's because at some point you have to ask yourself, look, do you want to play D&D or not? So what's my character going to do in that case? Like, okay, we want to hire you to escort this lady around. What am I going to do? Say no, walk away from the table? Well, that's your game. Goodbye, folks. But you know what I'm talking about. So this happens, And it's not even like it's stunning to like even if like you rescue a woman from like being burned at the stake for being a witch. She's a witch. I promise you. That even happens in like fucking Hawk the Slayer. She is a witch. She's not evil, but whatever. There's a but and I've done this so many times where it's not literally a succubus, but it's this seriously it actually points to my own chauvinism. It really is like a deep-seated sexual hang-up, I think, that a lot of male gamers have, myself included for a long time, where, really, I know this is going to come across as me, like, insulting male gamers or coming down on them hard for being, like, sexually inexperienced, losers who hang out in the basement. That's not what I'm going for. It's not. I think it's actually a very common fear of women to a certain degree. And I'm not saying you'd run screaming from them, although. No, what I'm saying is if there's ever a demographic that has less experience talking to women than most others, it would be the D&D set. Is that fair enough to say? Less than most. And it's not to say that gamers out there don't get laid. It's not to say that actually almost all the gamers I know are married with kids, very happy, but in their adolescence, in their early 20s and 30s, sometimes. But, even the married ones, I figure, have some kind of not understanding of women, or they kind of have maybe a negative viewpoint of them. I used to myself. That was Freudian. No, but there's this, I guess there's this thing where, this is actually very deep psychologically, I think, and maybe someone who's actually taken psychology can really analyze this and figure out why. But there's actually kind of a catharsis or venting process that goes on, even in a DM's mind, where, and players will do this sometimes too, very young players normally, so I'm not throwing all of gamerdom under the bus, but we sometimes they like to play gender bending characters where male gamers will play female characters and then be like really overly sexual or usually offensively so. Now that's not to say that male gamers don't play. I played several female player characters, and if anything, I severely underplay their sexuality to the point where I actually almost make them like asexual. Like I don't even go there, like it's, and really I think most gamers, male or female, should just not go there. Having a healthy relationship in a game, fine, but I honestly think sexuality should not be brought into the game all that much. Just because it gets weird. It gets double weird when the guy's playing a female character and he's hitting on another guy. Ugh, no homo, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. It gets weird when anybody is hitting on another character in character. Doesn't work out well because then things get weird. Anyway, going back to what I was saying about the reasons for it, you can chalk it up to a lot of things. Even maybe kind of a loathing of women sometimes, but like some DMs really kind of get off on this, where they kind of paint some women as being evil or making women the antagonists a lot of times, or kind of maybe using the player characters as a proxy to hurt them the way women hurt them. See, you can really turn this all over the place, but this just happens a lot where the women in RPGs tend to usually be two-faced. It's almost never this case where you'll rescue a dude from a dungeon. Usually the dude will take up arms with you and fight. It's almost never the case, that at least in my experience, where the guy, it turns out to be like this assassin who immediately turns face on them and kills one in their sleep. A woman character is way more likely to do that. Even when I would write the adventures, for some reason, that was just the way it was. Even my last campaign that I ran on Justin TV or Twitch, it just happened that several of the main antagonists were women. And really, maybe you could chalk it up to my own psychosis, or I really think I was really conscious of this when I wrote that adventure, though. So I don't know if just sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, but I had it was kind of like I was doing a spin on several characters. One was a goddess called the Scorpion Queen, and in this case, the Scorpion Queen was essentially a dead god that had removed itself out of space and time and had decided to come back like 2,000 years into the future, where its enemy, or where her enemies were gone. So that's what that was. And although that character was kind of meant to be a one-off, the goddess would return and they were supposed to defeat her, and then she was gone. So it wasn't going to be like this recurring thing, but it actually tied in really well to one of the characters' backstories, because the Scorpion Queen scored a crit. And usually when I have like really meaningful, dramatic crits or something like that, I usually like to have it some way leave a scar. And not necessarily a physical scar, but a mental scar. And so I decided that in some small way that Garrett would be possessed of a small fragment of the Scorpion Queen's essence. And so there was that. And the second main villain was the Witch Queen of the Elves, who I decided to kind of make an evil spin on Galadriel. Like, what if Galadriel really was that really fearsome, spooky bitch, when she was tempted by the ring? And that was kind of the whole decision to go with that. So I'm guessing it was kind of more coincidence that I'd written it that way, although you could easily see it the other way. But you can really analyze this one a great deal. So, how do you get around this? And and actually later on in the campaign, I actually had several fans call me out on this. They're like, why is it like virtually every villain in your game is female? And again, that was not true, because there was I think probably the most long-term villain in that one, really another one of the most stereotypical stories in fantasy is the evil advisor, or the evil what's the name, steward of the castle, takes over the throne. That was a dude, and that was really the overarching villain of the story, was that steward guy, to the point where he raised a lich, and the lich was a dude. But I'm starting to come off like I've got lots of gay friends. I know lots of black people, stuff like that. So I kind of was like, that's I took that to heart. I was like, I should be conscious of this. And so ironically, what I would do is I threw a female prisoner. They were going to this this tower to get a thing, go to the tower, get the thing, there's an evil wizard there, so on and so forth. And the deal was, this wizard had a handmaiden that was basically a slave, that would fetch his ingredients, like kind of like a hot female Igor, do his experiments and bring him coffee and clean his underwear and shit. So her name was, I think it was Eve or something like that. So I made every effort to kind of not really overtly do it, but I would say she was beautiful. I would say she was beautiful. She moves with grace. She looks, despite her grungy appearance and her tattered clothes, you can see that she looks relatively healthy and fit, and you can see the beauty shining out, that kind of stuff. And again, nobody was afraid of this woman. Like, nobody was like, she was kind of begging them for help, and and I wasn't being like, oh, please save me. I just said she kind of looks up at you with sad eyes and stuff like that. And so I think I did a really good job of putting her over as not a threat, and definitely not like a sexual predator. You know what I mean? Honestly, I was kind of taken with how the player characters sympathized with this woman, and so I was kind of patting myself on the back for uh, kind of presenting a really sympathetic character, and at the same time completely fooling the characters because guess what? She was a succubus. Now hold on. This comes after I was called out on saying that, on my many female villains on this one. She was a succubus. However, I was going to make it to where the wizard had captured this succubus and forced her into servitude. And so this succubus could take the form of a mortal woman, and so that's what she did. Because it would kind of look spooky to have this demon chick wandering around. And so, especially since there was this hope of rescue. So, they managed to defeat the wizard, and then you had the question of this handmaiden that was hanging around here, still kind of in shackles and stuff like that. She was in magical shackles, so she couldn't gate out. So they rescue her, and then they're like, what do we do with her? And so now, of course, you would think now this chick kind of hangs her out. They decide to take her to the nearest town, cut her loose. But in the meantime, she's using her wiles on this one of the guys to screw with her. And it just so happened the guy was, again, the bard, who was the best looking guy, Garrett. But here's what I did. I made it so the succubus was really actually kind of emotionally broken by this guy. So, even sometimes devils, she legit kind of has this love at first sight thing with Garrett. And so the game kind of broke apart shortly after this, but what I was going to do was have a legit succubus kind of turn good, despite herself, kind of going against her nature. And so I was actually going to have this thing where shit, now it's sounding like Twilight. She has a lot of conflicted emotions about this because she knows that she should be kind of serving her nature and stuff like that, but she loves this guy, and so she feels like she has to run. So she kind of bids them farewell and runs off. And so what I was going to have them do is, in case they were ever going to get in real trouble for an adventure, she was going to kind of subtly swing in, fly in, or something like that, and help them out. And they wouldn't even know. They're like, "What was that? I don't know." And so it would kind of develop that they would have this ally eventually that they finally would discover she was a succubus. Do we trust her? Do we not? Do we destroy her? Do we not? Is she tricking us? Is she not? That sort of thing. It kind of, I thought it was going to be kind of an interesting storyline on whether or not they really thought this devil could be redeemed. And so sometimes I think, in case you're a DM and you feel like you've done this, and you should be ashamed, as I have, it actually helps, I think. I like to do this now a lot. I like to play against stereotype, and I like to play against stereotype hard. So that's what I'll do a lot of times is, now that you're aware of it, what you should do is have women, like, straight up approach the hottest guy or even the ugliest guy. Maybe she's a chubby chaser. I don't know. I'm not saying chubby. You know what I'm saying. Actually, maybe she really likes dudes with, half-orc teeth. Some chicks are like that, Some elf chicks like dwarves. I don't know. I have the women approach them and are like, you are just so damn sexy, or maybe have her drunk or something like that. Maybe have the princess be straight up into the guy, or like sees him across the room, something like that. You can have like smoky, mysterious women kind of approach and be straight up with it. You don't need to make this a twist. And in some ways, playing it straight is the twist. Sometimes it's done crooked so many ways that it's almost more surprising if things are exactly as they seem. In fact, that's what was making my group so damn paranoid a lot of times, was I think a couple of them were really suspicious that I was kind of dropping hints about how pretty she was and how not flirtatious, but clingy that this woman was, and they're like, something's up because women don't normally pay this much attention to us, and women are all evil. So, and the fact that she for a while was very helpful, and anytime they made a request of her, she kind of did it, and she didn't, she stuck up for them, she fought for them. If they were under attack, she would at least kind of help out in some way, drag a guy over for healing, things like that. And that actually makes players very paranoid when they smell a trap and there isn't one. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, there's a bomb under the table, and tension is when it doesn't go off. So that's another one of those traps I think you can play where they're basically expecting the horns and the tail to come out, and they're expecting to be ready for the succubus to leap out from under the sheets. But when that doesn't happen, all of a sudden they see succubi everywhere, and it may embolden some characters to, like, as soon as they know that, hey, maybe 18 charisma guy, he can kind of, and there actually are, like, perks and flaws and quirks and stuff like that say the character is a womanizer or he's a lusty guy. In Hackmaster, that does happen. So he's kind of driven to do this. Or maybe that's just his character. He's like some Han Solo kind of womanizer type guy. That's fine. But in some ways, that's almost like a death sentence. Some players will look at, oh my god, he has to be like a horn dog? Shit. Or the party will roll their eyes at the guy who's always trying to hit on the tavern wenches because they know it's going to be trouble. And make it not always be trouble. I'm not saying you have to get graphic with the sex or, describe things in detail. Just be like, yeah, right on, you hook up tonight. And, just have it be that. And so then you can ask these little leading questions to make them paranoid. Like, it's really this simple. You say, okay, yeah, you hook up tonight, and so you turn to the other guys and you go, yeah, you see Garrett across the room, and he's got this barmaid on his knee, and she's laughing at all his jokes. She's laughing uproariously at all his jokes. She's kind of feeling his hair, and she kind of whispers in his ear and motions upstairs, and he seems utterly smitten with this girl, and he goes up there. Now, what I just said was a perfectly logical, this would be something you might see. The bard is hitting on this woman and going, but now that I've called attention to it, I've just made this a focal point. Maybe this happens a lot, but all of a sudden, like, hey, you notice this. All of a sudden, this plants in the party's head that this is something worth paying attention to, even if it's not. And this is something that helps make players paranoid. And you can do this with a lot of things, but let's just stick with this example. All of a sudden, I've pointed out this barmaid who's laughing at all his jokes, which might seem fishy. They're like, maybe she's laughing too hard. Don't say that, but, sometimes in your tone or your inflection, or just the fact that you say she's laughing at all his jokes. And if you know Garrett, not all his jokes are that fucking funny. So that's what I'm saying is maybe she, like, something's up. And maybe they don't. Maybe they don't think so, but one of those guys will. One of them will be like, maybe we shouldn't leave Garrett alone. And then you've kind of created this atmosphere. It's a minor thing, but then you have this guy follow Garrett up to his room and then put his ear to the door as there's some serious hardcore shagging going on. So then you've just kind of embarrassed the guy. But maybe the next time, or maybe never. But there's things you can do to draw that out. Another thing you can do, this is very simple. This is classic, or at least I do this a lot. And I love it because I love paranoid characters. I love making them never feel at ease, even for like routine things. And almost nothing ever happens. But I'll do this. They'll be like, let's say they're in a dungeon, and I go, and I say there's a door ahead, and they go, I check it for traps. And I go, you don't find it. Always say that. Never say there are none. You say you don't find any. Or if they look into the darkness and they roll a perception check, I go, you don't see anything out there. That doesn't say that. It's better than saying there's nothing out there, Because once you've said that there's definitely nothing out there, if you say you don't see anything, well, they don't see anything. That's not to say there's nothing out there. So let's say they find no traps. And there is no trap, but you just say you find no traps. And then the guy says, well, I opened the door. I say, how do you open the door? Oh, shit. They will say, oh, shit. Like, right there, like, oh, shit. And so all of a sudden they get really nervous. And then they'll start doing things they would never have done in person. Like, they would never do this unless you specifically called them out on it. So, like, I'll say, okay, there's a door in front of you. How do you open this door? Well, how the fuck do you answer that? You know? Now you're like, I open it carefully? I'm like, no. Show me, like pretend this is a door here. Show me how you open it. And they're never going to be like, I stand in front of the door and I pull it open. No, they're going to be like, I kind of stand off to the side and I turn the knob and kind of, I'm off here to the side and I turn it so it swings away from me, you know? Or I'm behind the door when it opens, so I'm like, eesh. All of a sudden there's dudes like contorting and like opening it with their foot, or they get like a pole with a hook on it, and or there's a treasure chest. Show me how you open the treasure chest. And now all of a sudden everyone's like opening it away from them. It's very rarely it's silly things like that that plays against type. So let's they fuck around with the door and they pull it open and I go, okay, it's open. They're like, because now the door's open and they're like, he called it out for a reason. There's got to be a pressure plate on the other side of the door. And then all of a sudden they're like poking they are so fucking paranoid at this point. It's beautiful, you know? So this is another little DM trick that is kind of unrelated to the succubus thing, but it's stuff like that. It's playing against type that really helps ratchet up tension in a game. And so, you know, I'm sure there's counterexamples out there, and I know it's generalizing to say all women are evil, but you've probably run across this an inordinate number of times where a woman has approached you and it turned out to be a trap. Happens all the time. And there's a lot of cliches. Never get on the boat. What you like, seriously, it's have them get on the boat and have nothing happen. Sometimes you can make them really paranoid. Like, you can describe certain things that happen, like, oh, there's a storm blowing in. It kind of blew in unnaturally fast, but it's just a storm that blew in unnaturally fast. You know, or you can even describe, like, there's a lot of, like, fish, like, seem to be, swimming near the surface, near the boat, kind of following it. Mundane stuff that can really kill them. Or, a classic ambush scenario where they're riding down the road and they see an overturned wagon, which is one of the classic bandit scenarios where they approach the wagon and bandits pop out and they're like, haha, we fooled you. Maybe it's just a farmer overturned his wagon. You'll be stunned how they're like, come out. They got their bows, like, come out and don't throw down your weapons. And the farmer's like, what? Yeah. So do that. Have women are okay, have women kind of, it's almost like don't play them any differently than you'd play guys. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's not. Even for myself, it's not. How many times do you start doing really weird things with women characters? You make them either like overly sexualized or like really bitter bitches, or so, like, it's almost always like this negative connotation. At least in my experience, it's almost really a negative portrayal. And this is another thing that I started. Like, here's another story about this. I started doing this thing where they went into town, and it was a town they'd never been into, and this kindly middle-aged lady approaches them, and she's like, did you come down from this road? And they're like, yeah. And there's like, oh, that road, there's a lot of like orcs on that road, right? And they're like, yeah, we had to fight our way through them. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. Please have dinner with us. I've made fresh muffins. And they're paranoid about this because there's someone being nice to them And they're so unaccustomed to this, like people being straight up nice, that they're afraid of this. There's so many times when, and this is another thing where there's any time that you go to someone's house and there's food offered, it's always poison. Have you noticed that? Especially if it's like royalty or nobility or something like that, and they have you over for a banquet or even just a nice dinner. And usually the DM makes a point of saying, like, the servant brings you a goblet of wine, and it's fucking poison. I've lost count of how many times it's been poisoned. Like, again, in the Con Bravo thing, I think she actually gave me wine, and guess what? It was poison. It happens all the goddamn time. So anytime somebody, the DM explicitly tells them that somebody has brought them food, and especially puts over how good it smells, or how good it looks, or how good it tastes, it's fucking poison. And if it's a woman, it's a devil giving you poison, so she can fuck out your soul. Do you see where I'm going with this? There's so many pitfalls that are so common, and yet people continue to fall in them. So, again, this made them so paranoid because it was a woman, and not a hot woman. It was just kind of an average, farmer's wife, and so it was a woman and who just made some really really good cornbread muffins. And there's so many characters like, I don't eat. I stick with my trail rations. And I'm like, what? It's corn muffins, and they're like, yeah, but we don't know anybody in this town. And so, maybe that's healthy paranoia for certain adventurers, but come on, it's a farmhouse, So, even then, you can say something like, this is where you can really get sadistic with them. Let's say it is a perfectly normal, farmer's wife who made some cornbread muffins, but they suck. So, have one of them bite in the cornbread muffin and say, it tastes really funny. All of a sudden, poison! It is really funny how they'll react. And so, I mean, it depends on how sadistic you're willing to be. Like, you can say, this tastes really funny to you. It tastes almost like rotten. And then, then you're just being an asshole, but that's sometimes the job of the DM. Maybe she just put, a rotten egg in there or something like that, or not cornbread, but you know what I mean. Maybe sometimes there's just a spoiled egg, or it's stale or something like that, or maybe she just undercooked it, or maybe she just sucks as a cook, so, or maybe a bird shat in the bowl, or anything like that. But all of a sudden you've made them really nervous, if not poison, that they're going to get some kind of food poisoning or something like that. So it's try to identify those common traps that players always seem to fall into. That the evil advisor. I straight up played that to where the advisor was evil. In fact, they kind of had this guy pegged from the beginning, but just because I was there was nothing they could do about it, because of course, like Aladdin, the evil vizier, he looks evil. He's got the fucking mustache and the curly beard, and the guy is clearly fucking Satan. I was seriously, halfway through the adventure, I was seriously considering how to rewrite this to where the advisor is actually the good guy, to where he actually was not trying to usurp the throne. He's just straight up trying to protect the kingdom. And maybe he's being framed or something like that. So you could do that. You could have the advisor being the only guy who's like loyal to the kingdom, and maybe the king is trying to sell out his own family or something like that. All of a sudden, you've got this really interesting game, but you've made you could even say stuff like this, where you say like, the king looks like a goodly man. He's got he looks like a good guy. He's got this, rosy complexion. He laughs musically. He's got this little very, very cheery musical laugh, like he's Santa. In fact, you could even describe him as being like Santa. Whereas his advisor is this grim, dour-looking guy with a huge scar across his eye. The classic Bond villain setup, where of course he's got a scar over his eye. He must be evil. or a missing eye. Do that. Have an eye patch, because nobody good has an eye patch, right? So, do that. Have him walk with a limp. He took an arrow to the knee, and now he used to be, now he's the king's advisor and stuff like that. So, you can really play that up where every sign indicates this guy is clearly trying to usurp the throne, but maybe he's trying to save it. So it's like I said, that is kind of that is how you can throw a twist into something that's almost always played straight. Because I don't think anybody ever really twists it to where the evil advisor is really the good guy. Almost like it's almost like making the Sheriff of Nottingham the good guy, and Robin Hood is this basically merciless brigand who kills people. So that's where it comes down to. And don't come down on me for saying all women are evil. That's the headline. So, but yeah, be careful of that, especially if the DM hasn't seen this video. Realize that's happening to you, because women don't like you. Not in D&D anyway. There's, trust me, your adventuring guy is ugly. He's stupid. He carries a sword, and he's obviously dangerous. So, yeah, women aren't gonna, your average barmaid isn't gonna be into you. And even if you're a relatively attractive guy, I wouldn't bother.